Local news, national news, even feel-good news. Delivering the topics that are relevant to you.
That's why I listen to Joe. He covers it all.
The Joe Kelly Show on WDBO.
There's no satisfaction, regrettably, in being right that that submarine was not going to make it back. I mean, it's just I am no genius by predicting that that was the only way this was going to end. I regret. And now 5 people are dead, 5 people aren't coming home, and 5 people's bodies may never be recovered. It just may not be worth the risk of trying to recover the bodies from those who were lost in the submarine. It's not even a submarine; it's a submersible. It was a shoddily built submersible. I was reading today that there are 10 vessels on the planet that can take humans down as deep as the Titanic. There's only 10 vessels. And out of the 10 vessels, the one that disappeared is the only one that is not certified by this larger governing body of submersibles, of global submersibles. And as recently as 2018, that governing body had sent a letter to OceanGate telling them that they were jeopardizing not only the safety of their own customers and their own staff, but they were jeopardizing the industry. That if they had a catastrophic loss of life on, say, the Titanic or somewhere else underwater, that it would reflect badly on the entire industry of underwater tourism and exploration. And so exactly what they predicted in 2018, this panel of experts that from this submersibles organization, this global submersibles organization, they have been telling this group since 2018 that your systems are unsafe. We've got a local Central Florida couple that is engaged in a lawsuit with OceanGate because they would not pin down an exact date in which they were going to take the submersible to the Titanic, and eventually the family got tired of hassling around with them and said, you know what, just refund our money. And they never refunded the $220,000+ to this Central Florida family, and they have thus been involved in a lawsuit trying to get their deposits back, or I don't think it was just a deposit. I think they paid the whole thing. And so they've been trying to get their money back. And I guess as losses go from this company, OceanGate, losing a few $100,000 is better than losing 3 members of your family and 2 members of your staff. That's terrible. If there is any consolation, they died quick, and they probably were unaware that they were going to die. I mean, the pressure at that depth is so strong. I mean, it just would have been in the blink of an eye, and it would have just squished. All the air would have come out. All the oxygen would have come out. And anybody that was inside that would have been similarly squished. And they probably didn't experience any pain. And they certainly didn't. And there was one network, and I don't know which one it was. It was either OAN or not Netflix, Newsmax. I think it was it Newsmax that did this? So it was either OAN or Newsmax, but they put a little ticker in the bottom right corner of their TV screen that had a countdown clock for how much oxygen was left in the submarine, in the submersible, which is ludicrous on a couple of different levels. One, it's ludicrous to think that there's going to be an exact time in which the oxygen is going to run out. There will not be an exact time in which the oxygen was going to run out because people breathe at different rates. There are scrubbers inside that vessel that scrub the carbon dioxide and turn it into usable oxygen. So there are many variables involved, but to have a countdown clock on your TV screen is macabre. It is grotesque. It is horribly inappropriate. And it just turned my stomach. If you want to see the screen cap of that, I did post it on the WDBO Facebook page. I was so appalled by that. And then, of course, now as we discovered that they didn't die of suffocation, they didn't die knowing that they were going to die. they died instantly and probably hadn't the slightest idea that they were dying. Probably hadn't. They went from being alive and everything is cool to you're not alive anymore in the blink of an eye. And I guess sometimes for fun, we have those discussions of which way would you rather die? Would you rather? And, being squished in a submersible 2.3 miles under the ocean does not sound like fun. I had a scuba mishap some years ago, and it was terrible. I obviously didn't die. Could have, probably should have. Came close to putting myself in a position where I probably should have died. But it was my fault. It was operator error, as is often the case when it comes to these kinds of incidents. This thing down at the Titanic, it's operator error. It's operator error because they never should have been operating that vessel in the first place. It was not certified. It was not built properly. I mean, for Pete's sake, they had a video game console controller as the main controller for that submersible. And the company that makes the controller, what was it, Activision? Was it Activision, Laurel? Do you remember? Can you turn on Laurel's room?
Logitech, right?
Logitech. That makes better sense than Activision. So Logitech actually put out a tweet saying, hey, we're glad you're using our Logitech game controller for games, but this is a reminder, these should only be used for video games, not for steering submarines down to the Titanic. I added the last part. By the way, Paul in the chat room says it was News Nation that had that ticker up, the oxygen ticker. That is our chat room on the WDBO Facebook page. We do this every night. We do videos, so if you want to see the faces behind the voices on the radio, if you want to see what we look like, I will tell you that there's an old adage in radio that people on the radio have faces for radio. Your mileage may vary. But if you want to check out what the faces for radio look like, you can check it out right now on the WDBO Facebook page and be able to see that.
Don't do it.
Yeah, so what does this experience, does this change you in any way, shape, or form? Do you care any more or less about the Titanic? Do you think that we should stop tourism to the Titanic? Do you think that there should be greater government control over something like this? That there should have been government inspections of the submersible? I will tell you that there were plenty of red flags. Anybody who was going to get on that particular submersible, the Titan, should have done just a tiny morsel of homework to find out that that was not a certified submarine and it's a death trap. That submarine was destined to become a death trap, period, since it was first developed. It was developed in all the wrong ways. It was built with all the wrong materials. It was built with all the wrong oversight. But you know what? I don't believe that even though it's an American company, it would have had to be, inspected with American inspectors. But there isn't an inspection. There is no federal inspection protocol for submersibles. It doesn't fall under any particular government branch. They kind of self-police, which is why they sent out that letter in 2018 saying, hey, get your crap together, Ocean Gate, because you're going to make us all look bad. You're going to have an incident, and it's going to destroy it for everybody. And that's exactly what they've done. With regards to the 5 people, I got to tell you, it's heartbreaking to see the callousness with which people discount those 5 people as if they weren't real people. And I know it's half a world away. It's actually not. It's just off the North Atlantic coast. But it feels like it's a half a world away because it's at the bottom of the ocean. It's 2 miles under the water. And sometimes when things are that far removed, it's a little easier to laugh about it. It's a little easier to chuckle and tell submarine jokes. I have read more submarine jokes today than I have in my whole life. People are really having fun. And I don't know if it's because the passengers were millionaires and billionaires, if this is just contempt that American society has for millionaires and billionaires. I don't know what drives it. And while I will be the first to admit that having been in radio my whole life and being surrounded by news stories of the macabre and news stories of death and news stories of pain and misery, I will be the first to tell you that most of us in a working newsroom sometimes can have a macabre sense of humor. Sometimes we cope with the death and destruction that we read and report on every day by having a bit of a dark humor. It's kind of the same with cops. It's kind of the same with people who are morticians. I've got several family members that are morticians. There isn't a darker mind on the planet than morticians. And they cope with their grief usually through forms of humor or extreme alcoholism. Either way, I've seen it both with my family members. It's either through comedy or alcoholism. It goes both ways. But it's just sad to see people that are making fun of and having fun with the loss of 5 people. I will tell you that the 5 people who are dead have no one to blame but themselves. They should have done some homework. And if they were trying to save money, if the one submersible on Earth that is capable of reaching the Titanic that is not certified, I hope at least it was a cheaper ticket. If it was $250,000 to go down on a non-certified submersible, I hope that a certified submersible is charging twice that. Because that is just terrible. And I know that everybody who got on board that signed a disclaimer. And I hope somehow, some way that a judge is able to look at that and toss the disclaimer, that they signed their rights away. Because quite frankly, that company should never have been operating. And they deliberately put the lives of their clients at risk. And they should be held accountable for the loss of those 5 people. What do you think? 844-580-WDBO. It's 844-580-9326. You can use the open mic in the WDBO app. Let me know your thoughts right now. And then don't nobody go nowhere. We're going to get into that coming up in a minute. We'll get your calls and comments. Plus, we're getting word now that Senator Rick Scott is thinking about throwing his hat into the ring for the presidential race. Oh, my. We'll get into that for you coming up in a few minutes as well. Stay with us here. I'm Joe Kelly. This is The Joe Kelly Show on WDBO.
Now, the 3 big things you need to know.
3. The Furby is returning to celebrate its 25th anniversary. Hasbro has launched a new version of its animatronic toy on Amazon. It will launch Thursday. The $70 toy will also be available in stores nationwide beginning July 15th. 2. Tropical storm Brett's top winds remain near 70 miles an hour. The National Hurricane Center expects Brett to lash the Lesser Antilles with strong winds and heavy rains this evening and tonight before weakening. Tropical Depression 4 has formed farther out in the Atlantic and is expected to quickly become Tropical Storm Cindy. 1. The father and aunt of Congressman George Santos have been revealed as the ones who secured his $500,000 bail. Attorneys for Santos unsuccessfully tried to block the judge from releasing their identities. Santos was arrested in May on charges of wire fraud, money laundering, and theft of public funds.
This is WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's news and talk.
By the way, we have got a lot more storms that are coming through. I was really hoping that band that was heading out to the Atlantic was the last one, and it is not. If you're just north of the Orlando area right now, you get at Altamont Springs, Wekiva Springs, some pretty heavy showers. In Claremont, Montverde, you got some pretty heavy showers. And it's all moving to the east. It's moving towards the ocean, towards the beaches, towards the Daytona International Speedway, the Daytona Beach. area. So, but nothing severe at this point. It is just some strong storms as they pass through. But again, you're likely to get wet and rained on. Beverly Bentley Steele's going to have more on that traffic ride for us coming up in just a few minutes. So y'all stick around for that. While you're at work today, you might have missed the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard gave a press briefing about the search findings for that missing submersible. The bulk of what the admiral from the Coast Guard had to say, he did in 2 minutes. Here you go.
This morning, an ROV, or remote-operated vehicle, from the vessel Horizon Arctic discovered the tail cone of the Titan submersible approximately 1,600 feet from the bow of the Titanic on the seafloor. The ROV subsequently found additional debris. In consultation with experts from within the Unified Command, the debris is consistent with the catastrophic loss of the pressure chamber. Upon this determination, we immediately notified the families. On behalf of the United States Coast Guard and the entire Unified Command, I offer my deepest condolences to the families. I can only imagine what this has been like for them, and I hope that this discovery provides some solace during this difficult time.
You know, I am such a student of spoken and written word. I love spoken and written word, and I love how that Coast Guardsman never said they died, but we understood exactly what he was getting at. It was abundantly clear that that is what he was describing, and I liked how he was able to do it in a means in which he didn't have to say, they're dead, they were squished to death, or anything else like that. Oh, Kevin is in Kissimmee. You're on WDBO. Hey, Kevin, how are you?
Hey, Joe. If they're out in the middle, where the Titanic is located, isn't that international waters?
Yeah, it's like 900 miles off the coast of Massachusetts. So, yeah, that's international waters.
Well, you really know if people go down to it or whatever, there's nothing to stop them from doing it.
Yeah, that's pretty much right. Yes.
Now, inspecting that submersible that went down, if it's registered in the U.S., then the Coast Guard can inspect it. But if it's not registered in the U.S., I don't think the Coast Guard can inspect it. It's more of a, just like a check for food or something.
Yeah, that is.
Know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you make a good point on that, Kevin. In that any vessel on the water can be policed, if you will, by the Coast Guard. And I don't know to what extent, though, that they would be able to alter anything with a submersible. I know if you go out on your boat on the weekends, they're going to look for life jackets. They're going to look for fire extinguishers. They're going to look to make sure that everybody is sober. But fire extinguishers and life jackets aren't going to do a whole lot of good inside a submersible that's down more than 2 miles.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I watched Northern Law, Northwest Law, Northeast Law, Maine and New Hampshire.
One of those.
When they're out there on the boat, the
Right.
game wardens are checking for life jackets for everybody on there, a fire extinguisher.
Yeah, my mom and dad were in the Coast Guard Auxiliary, and that's what they did every weekend as they went out to the lake and they did boat inspections. But that, again, a little bit different than the submersible there. Coming up, somebody asked if I could elaborate on my scuba mishap. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll elaborate on that coming up in a minute. So hang on for that. Plus more of your calls and comments about the submersible and the 5 passengers who have died.
This is WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's news and talk. In-depth segments on topics that matter to Orange, Seminole, Osceola, and all of Central Florida. The Joe Kelly Show on WDBO.
I love your show every night. You're doing great, bud.
You ever count up how many brushes with death that you've had? Laurel, is that a thing? Or is that just in my world where I count how many brushes with death I have had?
Probably more. Like I in a I'm like, how close have I gotten to death? Will I ever know, right? But I haven't counted on my hands.
Really?
Things I was conscious and aware of.
With all of the car crashes that you have had?
Hey, only one of those was my fault.
Of course, yes. Only one was your fault. Everyone else was at fault. Of course it is. All right, 844-580-WDBO, or you hit me up in the open mic and the WDBO app. Let's go to Mark in Orlando. You're on WDBO. Hi, Mark.
Hey, Joe. First off, real quick, glad you're doing better and appreciate your team covering for you.
Me too. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate that. We're very lucky to have a talented bench.
Yeah, rooting for you to become a cyborg in the near future.
Thank you.
Just a comment on your topic. The thing with the submersible strikes me as very similar with folks that have gone into space and privately and do things like climb Mount Everest and buy fast sports cars because they can. And in some ways it advances technology for the rest of us, but it's sort of rich folks seeking thrills, and occasionally, like you're talking about, you do something that's dumb and it kills you. You're about to talk about scuba diving. I did some stupid things on a motorcycle when I was a lot younger. I'm in my mid-60s now, and afterward I thought, well, I probably shouldn't have done that, and I didn't do it again. Is
it not amazing how we all survived? Well, we didn't all, but at least those of us are having this discussion right now. We all survived our teen years.
Hey, I rode bicycle without a helmet.
Yep.
Probably sat in the back of a station wagon with the tailgate open, facing the exhaust. Things like that.
It is amazing. No doubt. Mark, thank you so much, man. I'm so glad you called, and thank you so much for your kind words. Zach is in Oviedo here on WDBO. Hey, Zach.
Hey, Joe. They were talking about body recovery.
Yeah.
That isn't going to happen.
I would agree with you.
They popped. So they're over 1,500 miles of current away, and maybe they might find like a fingertip or something like that. Or maybe they might find a T-shirt with kind of a little bit of somebody left stuck into carbon fiber, which is very jagged. No. There's no body recovery at all.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. There's just not going to be anything to recover. It reminds me a little bit, as long as we're having a macabre discussion, it reminds me a little bit of the Challenger explosion. I know that there were body parts.
I was here. I saw it.
There were body parts that were recovered, but there were no bodies. And even worse, the Columbia disaster.
No. The Columbia, I remember that too.
They all burned up on the way in, and
I know, and they were flung out into the atmosphere and on fire.
Yeah. Terrible story, Zach. Thank you so much, man. I'm so glad you called. I appreciate that. 844-580-WDBO.
Hey, if more people want to keep trying to go down to the Titanic and they want to climb to the top of Everest, they want to get slingshotted out into space, let them do it, man. More power to them. It's called population control. If you want to do it, do it.
And it certainly is a rich man's game. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And I don't begrudge anybody for having that kind of money. I don't begrudge them at all for having that kind of money and having the ability to do that. But it does seem to be, and I think that's why some people have been more glib about it, because these aren't, quote unquote, ordinary people. I would argue that all of God's children are ordinary people. But these were wealthy, these were privileged people, and consequently, I think a lot of people are a little bit more cavalier and glib about it.
The Joe Kelly Show on WDBO.
Triple team traffic now as we check that drive here on yet another soggy and rainy afternoon. In for Paul Cross, it's Beverly Bentley Steele.
Well, there's at least good news. It's not a Friday and it's raining. We'll see what happens tomorrow. For right now, you're still dealing with a 5-mile backup if you're on the turnpike heading southbound just past 192. It's a crash that's blocking the right lane, and it's causing that 5-mile delay. From the WDBO Triple Team Traffic Center, I'm Beverly Bentley Steele.
You know, they said it was a 10-hour trip down to the Titanic. A 10-hour trip. That alone would stop me from going down and visiting the Titanic. I ain't going to ride 10 hours in an enclosed tube, sitting, crisscross applesauce and having to go down, 2.3 miles to the bottom of the ocean. That ain't going to happen.
Hi, this is Vicky from Orlando.
Hi, Vicky.
Very tragic to hear about the submarine that was found, although if my family member had been on there, I would have preferred that that it was an explosion and not that they suffered for 5 days slowly, running out of air. I do not think that they should restrict travel because, people want to explore and I think they should be free to do that.
I think this is a legit question. Laura, would you rather die instantly without having any warning whatsoever? You're alive 1 second and you're obliterated the second. Or would you rather know that your death is coming, it's imminent, and you've got some time to maybe get square with God, get square with the people that are on the submersible with you, maybe try to leave a message that could be discovered, sometime later?
If I was on land and I could, eat a whole chocolate cake and tell everybody I loved them, maybe I'd want to know. But if I'm in a submersible 12,000 feet down, no, right away. Kill me right away. I don't want to know.
I'm sorry. And what part does the chocolate cake play?
Because I'm dying. I'm going to eat whatever I want. That's the point. If they're like, you have 48 hours. I'm like, that's it. I'm eating everything I ever wanted to eat, and I'm eating all of it.
There's a sense of me that I got to tell you, I think that I would want some time to get square. I would want some time to be able to pray. I would want some time... If given those options. I mean, it's not like you're going to, do you want to die right now or do you want to die in an hour from now? I was like, well, okay, all right, we'll figure this out. But I do think that I would want a little bit more time.
If people are allowed to climb Mount Everest at 29,000 feet and possibly die, I think they should be able to dive 13,000 feet and possibly die.
Yeah, that is true. There's always going to be high adventure trips for people that have high adventure minds and high adventure bank accounts. It will always happen. I read this interesting statistic over the weekend. I had a lot of time to read over the weekend. And I had read that there are, and this blew my mind. Let me just throw this out here to you, Laurel, to see if you could throw out a number. So I'm putting you on the spot, and I don't expect you to know the answer, so I'm not trying to make you look stupid. So please forgive me. That is not my goal. But of mountains on Earth that are 23,000 feet or taller, keep in mind Everest is 29,000 and change, almost 30,000. So of mountains on Earth that are 23,000 feet or taller, how many planets on Earth that are 23,000 feet or taller have never, ever been summited by man?
Oh, okay. Totally random guess. I'm going to say 3.
That's a good random guess. If I was asked the same question, that's probably what I would throw out there as well. 20.
Wow.
There are 20 mountains on Earth that are 23,000 feet or taller.
Okay, and then now, not knowing, you might be about to say it, but, I mean, we keep scaling Everest over and over again because it's the tallest? We're not just trying to go for the other ones?
Right, because it is the absolute tallest. It is the pinnacle. It's the brass ring. It is the top of the mountaineering world. And I would have to assume that for the other 20 mountains, there's a variety of reasons why they've not been summited, the biggest of which would be they're impossible to summit. I mean, some mountains are just going to be impossible to summit, and Everest was thought to be one of those mountains. But I feel like with today's technology and with the ingenuity of so many people, and especially now that we've seen, so many people dying on Everest just because of the backup of hikers, backup of climbers, that they've way oversold the adventure on Mount Everest. It's become a retail adventure on Everest when it used to be an extreme adventure on Everest. I think that they should focus on, and who am I? The grand arbiter of mountain climbing and high adventure, Joe Kelly declares, I think they should try to scale some of those other mountains. They can go do it alone. They don't have to worry about crowding because no one else is doing it. But they should work on climbing some of those other mountains first, but that's probably just me.
Those 5 poor souls might as well have been trying to climb Mount Everest and failed because they share a similar fate that their bodies probably will never be recovered.
Yeah, I would think so. I would think so as well. They're going to stay down there. And, I was writing a news story about this earlier, and as I mentioned earlier, when you work in a newsroom, if you're a cop, if you work in a mortuary, you kind of have a dark humor, and sometimes your dark humor is your coping mechanism. It's how you deal with so much death and destruction and trauma. And as I was writing the story, I just kept writing glib words, and I'm like, why am I writing so glibly about this? And because I don't feel glibly, but I just kept writing glibly, and as an example, I wrote, for the first time in 111 years, the Titanic has claimed 5 new victims. And, if you remember, the movie Titanic was such a juggernaut of a movie. We all saw it. Most of us saw it multiple times. And, so the Titanic is a really big, important piece of our culture, of our identity of sense as humans, and that was a part of American and global history, the likes of which we'd never seen prior to that. So it's a big deal with what's going on at the Titanic. 844-580-WDBO. It's 844-580-9326. You can use the open mic in the WDBO app. My name is Joe Kelly. Look for the Joe Kelly Show podcast wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find the Joe Kelly Show Facebook page wherever you get your Facebook, which is, Facebook. I'm Joe Kelly. We'll continue with more of your calls and comments coming up.
The Joe Kelly Show on WDBO. The Joe Kelly Show on WDBO. News, weather, traffic, all the things you want on your drive home. Plus, Joe Kelly being, Joe Kelly. Now, the Joe Kelly Show on Orlando's News and Talk, WDBO.
I still cannot believe that they pulled the equivalent of a 2-liter bottle of Coke out of my lungs, the fluid. How did that fit? You've seen me. How was I walking around with a 2-liter bottle of Coke in my lungs?
It was you were filled lengthwise because you were tall.
That must be what it is, right? It may be a couple of inches taller for sure, but I'm still recovering from that mess. All right, 844-580-WDBO or use the open mic and the WDBO app.
When I was growing up, we watched the Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau.
Jacques Cousteau.
And it was fabulous, educational, exciting, and just thrilling and beautiful. That's enough for me.
Yeah.
So if I see video, film, photos of the Titanic, that's good enough for me.
Yeah, I do not feel the need that I must put my eyeballs on the Titanic.
Hey, Joe, Kim from Kissimmee, and good to hear your voice. And
thank
Laurel
you,
did
Kim.
an amazing job carrying the show. No one deserves to die, but the owner of this company had enough money to go ahead and improve what he had created, but instead he chose to use it as a money-making operation, and shame on him. He failed.
I'm with you. I know that everybody signed those disclaimers, but I do hope that somehow, some way, the Ocean Gate owners should be held accountable for this. It was their actions that led to the death of 5 people. And it likely happened, by the way, on Saturday or Sunday, whenever this submersible first went missing. They don't believe it happened today. They believe it happened straight away the second they lost contact with them. We'll continue. I'll tell my near-death scuba diving story for you coming up next. Stay with me.
The Joe Kelly Show on WDBO. Now, WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580. Triple Team Traffic.
There's a crash that's going on I-4 that had the road shut down for a time. It's I-4 westbound. It's no longer shut down, but there is a crash blocking the right lane at Kirkman Road, and there's solid backups going from the Turnpike to Kirkman. And on the Turnpike heading southbound just past 192, there's a crash that's got the right lane blocked, and it's causing a 5-mile backup because a truck got stuck on the right guardrail, and everyone had to just slow down and check that out. There's also collision on the 429 heading southbound before I-4 in an area that's already solid. From the WDBO Triple Team Traffic Center, I'm Beverly Bentley Steele.
This is WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580. Orlando's News and Talk. Connected to our community. Talk local issues and events with Joe Kelly. Use the open mic in the WDBO app and let Joe know what interests you. The Joe Kelly Show on WDBO.
Hey, you can join our chat on the WDBO Facebook page. I will tell you, we've had like a record number of people that have joined us in the chat today, which it's nice to see that building every day. So thank you for everybody who's joined us in our chat. If you want to be able to see the behind the scenes, the BTS of the WDBO, then check it out right now on the WDBO Facebook page, and you'll be able to follow along at home and see what everybody behind the scenes here looks like. Do you remember the final scene of the movie Titanic, Laurel? Do you remember the very final scene after the old lady throws the diamond of the ocean?
Heart of the ocean or something, yeah.
Yeah, then that woman makes all these guys go through all these hoops, and then she just throws that damn thing into the ocean like a crazy woman, and then she dies. And then what happens after she dies?
I don't know. I don't remember. It's been years since I've seen it.
So the scene then cuts to a modern-day looking Titanic, and all of the people who died on the Titanic are there to greet Rose as she joins them following her death. Right? Do you remember that now?
Kind of, yeah.
And standing there is a young, Leonardo DiCaprio character, Jack. And Jack is standing there on the big staircase that in the middle of the Titanic there, remember? And he reaches out his hand and he welcomes her, and she's no longer the old lady. She's the young Kate Winslet, looking person. And so according to that movie, according to James Cameron lore, all of the Titanic victims live on the Titanic in pristine condition at the bottom of the ocean. Now, could you imagine you're Rose and you're all the rest of the people that were on the Titanic, and suddenly these 5 people show up and you're like, who the hell are you guys? And how did you die on the Titanic? And how did you die on the Titanic? It's just got to be crazy, right? To think that the Titanic hasn't claimed a life in 111 years. And now the Titanic has claimed 5 lives.
It is sad that we lost 5 lives who wanted to take a gamble on their life going down to the Titanic. But Ocean Gate should also pay back all the millions of dollars it took to search for the missing people. They should be paying that back, as well as compensating the families that they put in their hands.
Yeah, no doubt about it. They've got to be somehow held accountable for these deaths. I mentioned in the last hour that I had a mishap once when I was scuba diving. It was a near-death it was a near-death experience for me.
Hey, Joe, so glad that you're back. Terrible thing that happened. I was just curious to find out what your scuba diving experience was.
Okay, so I was like 16 years old. I was living in Southeast Texas. I was in the middle of my cancer treatments. So I was going through radiation therapy and chemotherapy, and I had got my Open Water 1 certification to dive when I was, 16 years old or something like that. And so when I wasn't getting chemotherapy treatments, one of the things I found that helped me was to be in the ocean. Because if I was in the ocean, I felt that my nausea would go away. So I really enjoyed my scuba diving. And I had signed up for a 3-dive tour boat adventure. Most of the dives I had done before that were simply a 1-dive adventure, and we would go out in the Gulf Coast off of Texas, and we would dive on oil rigs. I loved diving on oil rigs because you are, in one sense, protected from the moment you enter the water all the way down to the bottom of the ocean. You're always surrounded by this steel structure, which is the oil rig, and I like that sense of protection. When I signed up for this 3-dive trip, it was to a wreck, and I'd never I'd never dove on a wreck before. And I quickly found I hated diving on wrecks for the reason why I love diving on oil rigs, because there's no protection. What they'll tell you to do is follow the anchor chain down. You're diving into the abyss. Follow the anchor chain down. The anchor chain is dropped near the wreck. So you've got to be damn near on the wreck before you can start to see it. And I get to the wreck, and the wreck was 60, 65 feet in depth at the top of the wreck, but the bottom of the wreck was about 110 feet depth in the ocean. And I was a spear fisherman, so I love to shoot fish underwater. And I had caught in my eyes the glimpse of a giant lingcod, and I thought, I'd like to spear that. And so I did successfully. And when you spear a fish, your hope is you hit them in the chest somewhere where their heart is, and then they die after you spear them. Sometimes, most times in my case, you spear them, you miss the heart, they're still alive, and they're trying like hell to get away. And in my case, the lingcod was so big that I had hit that he instantly took me to the bottom of the ocean. So I had no way to hold on. I had nothing to grab onto. I had no way, because it was a wreck, not an oil rig. With an oil rig, I could at least grab one of the pylons. I could grab one of the things and hold on for dear life. But this thing just took me down to the bottom of the ocean, took me down to the bottom of the shipwreck, and suddenly got tangled up in all kinds of fishing lines that were broken on this shipwreck.
No.
And so I'm down there and I'm freaking out. And all this, Laurel, is going through my mind in seconds. In seconds, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to die.
Sure.
Or I've got to do this, I got to do that. And then your training kicks in. And in that case, my training kicked in. And I thought, I have a knife. So I had a sheathed knife in at my ankle. And so I pulled the knife out and I started cutting fishing line that I was tangled up in. And once I got untangled from the fishing line, I went over to the fish that I had that was still on my spear, and I started pulling his gills out with my fingers. That's how you kill a fish underwater, is you pull their gills out. So I was trying to disable this fish so it would stop swimming around like a madman, and I rip its gills out, and it finally stops moving, and I was happy about that. And so I feel like, okay, I got everything under control. I've got the knife, I've cut myself free, and I am ready to surface or whatever. I've got this fish, no harm, no foul. Well, as I mentioned, it was a 3-dive trip, and it was the second dive of the day, and I made a mistake. And most people who die in scuba diving incidents do it because of their own mistakes that they made. It's human error. And I realized that when I went on my second dive, I didn't grab, I'm embarrassed to admit this out loud, I didn't grab my second tank. And instead, I grabbed my first tank that I'd already used on a dive that had been ever so slightly refilled. Ever so slightly. I don't think they put much air in it. And so I did not check my levels before I went down. I didn't check the air pressure before I went down, which is like the one thing that a scuba diver has to get right. There's like one thing. Make sure your tank has sufficient air in it, and I did not. So after I ripped out the gills of this fish and I grabbed my pressure regulator to see how much air I have left in my tank, I realized that I've got, this was a long time ago, and I've been through a lot since, so forgive me if my math is off by a little bit, but I remember having the equivalent of about 4 or 5 breaths of air left in my tank. And I'm at 110 feet of depth. And so my first instinct at that point is to find your dive buddy, right? They always say you dive with a buddy, find your dive buddy. And just like we've talked about on the Titanic, the current that day was very, very, very strong. And I realized that by the time I had come up from the bottom of the ocean to about 100-foot level or so, the current had already taken me pretty far away. And as I saw my dive partner, he was swimming away from me with his back to me. And so one of the things they teach you in scuba class is metal on metal makes sound underwater. So once again, you pull your knife back out and you start wrapping the back of your knife onto your scuba tank. And that metal on metal makes a sound underwater. So I'm just wrapping like crazy my scuba knife onto my scuba tank, and my scuba buddy could not hear it, or he did not hear it, or he didn't care to hear it, or he didn't care if I lived or died. I don't know which was the case, but he didn't turn around. I'll tell you that much. He didn't turn around. And so at that point I thought, okay. And again, Laurel, this is one of those things where it all happens in a fraction of seconds, right? But in your mind, you think it's taking hours. So at that point, I thought, okay, my only option here remaining is an emergency swimming ascent, which they teach you in dive school. So I have to make an emergency swimming ascent from 100 feet. That's dangerous. That's dangerous for popping your lungs. They teach you that as you make an emergency swimming ascent, to cock your head back and to make a slight oh sound with your voice, because that lets the air out of your lungs, because as you surface, the air in your lungs expands and it will pop your lungs. It will pop the little ovuli, or what are they called? The little
Don't do this again. I don't know.
The little sacs in your lung. There's one word that's a female body part, and then there's one word for the sacs in your lung, and I'm not sure which word is which. So I'm just going to say the little sacs in your lung will pop, and it can kill you. So as I start making my emergency swimming ascent, they teach you, drop everything you have. Drop your weight belt, drop your spear gun, drop your fish, drop everything. This is life or death. Well, in my dumbass mind, I'm sitting here thinking, but wait, I have a third dive left after this one. If I drop my weight belt and drop my spear gun and drop everything, I'm not going to be able to make the third dive. Can you believe how selfish the human mind works? At least how selfish mine worked. I mean, that's dumb. That's so dumb. So I held on tightly to my spear gun. I kept my weight belt. I kept everything on me, and I started my emergency swimming ascent. And I will tell you that little oh sound you're making as you're ascending, by the time I got near the top of the ocean, was more like a ah! And I don't know if you've ever seen a torpedo shot out of the water, you know, like a nuclear submarine when it shoots like a tomahawk out of the water. That's pretty much what happened to me, because my buoyancy compensator, that's that little vest thing that you wear, had completely filled with air by the time I got to that elevation in the water. And it shot me out of the water completely. I think my feet all the way came out of the water like a torpedo being shot. And then I land. And then, Laurel, you think, that's it. You're safe. You're good.
Yeah.
It's all good, man. I made it to the top. I'm safe.
Oh, there's a butt coming.
Oh, there's a butt coming. So I told you the current was really bad that day. And I was so far downstream from the dive boat. And I was so tired from the experience. I knew there was no way I was going to be able to swim back to the dive boat. So suddenly here I am in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, knowing I'm not going to be able to swim to the dive boat. I am screwed. And fortunately, I was not the only diver who got blown away by the current. And there was another diver between me and the boat. And I was able to get his attention. And he was able to get the boat's attention. And the boat sent a Zodiac for me. Do you know what a Zodiac is?
No.
Zodiac's one of those inflatable little motorboats.
Oh, sure. Okay.
So they sent a Zodiac for me, and I was so relieved as I climbed into the Zodiac, as God is my witness, as I tossed my spear gun into the Zodiac, the spear tip poked a hole in the Zodiac. I was the least favorite person on the dive boat that day.
Bad luck.
And when I finally got back to the dive boat and the Zodiac was running out of air, we just barely made it back to the dive boat. I still had that fish, right? So I threw this giant lingcod up onto the deck of the boat, and I started to get out of my dive gear. In my last insult of the day, the fish, as I laid it on the deck of the boat was so damn hot because it was steel. It was a steel boat deck that it cooked one half of the fish on the deck of the boat, ruining any chances of using the fish for any other purposes other than fishing bait. But that was it. And then you'll be glad to know that I ultimately decided to take a pass on the third dive that day. I said, I'm just going to rest up here on the boat while you guys go down. I have caused enough problems for the day. So that was one of my many brushes with death. I was absolutely, positively certain as I was down there 100 feet and I looked up and I could see the water shimmering above me 100 feet over my head. I thought, that is where I have to be to live, and there's no way I'm going to make it there on time. But I made it. And it's one of those, it's incidents like that make me look back upon my life and realize all the times that God had his hand on me that I didn't know it at the time. But later it becomes abundantly clear that God is keeping me around for something. My name is Joe Kelly. It's 844-580-WDBO. It's 844-580-9326. You can use the open mic in the WDBO app. Stay with us.
The Joe Kelly Show on WDBO. The Joe Kelly Show on WDBO. Insightful.
You tell the truth from your point of view.
Entertaining.
Man, that guy is a lot taller than he sounds on the radio.
And engaging.
When we hear you on the radio, it's a good thing.
The Joe Kelly Show on WDBO.
I think this falls under the play stupid games, win stupid prizes. I mean, if they got the money to go down, I mean, let them go. I mean, it's their risk.
Yeah, I think the modern version of that is F around and find out. And I think you're right. They F'd around and they have thus found out that, it's not going to work out for them.
Hey, Joe, your little scuba diving venture explains all that water in your lungs. It's been in there all this time.
Yes, since I was 16 years old. It's been there for so long.
Would they also be somewhat liable if they're found, responsible for all these resources that were pulled together to try to help save these people?
That's a good, I really like that question. So the question is whether or not that company should be liable for rescue costs. When you go to Mount Everest, when you climb Mount Everest now, you are required to sign that you will pay for any rescue efforts that are made for you, dead or alive. And there was a woman this climbing season that just ended. There was a woman who had to be rescued, and it's been a big deal because she has refused to pay. I mean, she was going to die. She would not have made it off of the peak alive, and a Sherpa helped get her down, and she refused to pay. So, you can tell people that they owe money, but you can't necessarily make them pay the money that they owe. I'm Joe Kelly. My number is 844-580-WDBO. It's 844-580-9326. It is really rather remarkable that what is said to be the best restaurant in all of the United States of America is right here in Orlando, Florida. Isn't that crazy to think that? Not New York, not LA, not Chicago, but right here in Orlando, Florida, we have the best restaurant in all of America. Hang on, we're going to break it down for you what it is and what it's going to cost you to go there. We'll look at some of the menu items and more. That'll be coming up next. Stay there.
This is WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's news and talk. Breaking news to lively debates, covering the issues that matter to you.
I make it a point to listen to Joe Kelly when I need to fully understand what's happening in the news.
Now, the Joe Kelly Show on Orlando's news and talk, WDBO.
So I have become aware this afternoon of a great controversy here inside the four walls of our building at Cox Media Group Orlando, WDBO, and our sister stations. And the controversy involves a cake. We have a bona fide cake controversy. Laurel, how in the hell can you have a cake controversy at a radio station or any place of business?
When you said the cake controversy, I'm like, oh, this is something on the internet. It's something somebody made up. But I didn't know it was here in-house. I can't even begin to think what this is about.
So we have a cake controversy. Now, I've got to go back to May 1st. May 1st, when we expanded this show from 1 hour to 2 hours, I was caught flat-footed, surprised as I could ever be, that the staff brought in a giant, what do you call that, a sheet cake? Sheet cake?
Yeah, it's a sheet cake, yeah.
And it was a sheet cake with my picture on it and the Joe Kelly Show logo, and congratulations on expanding to 2 hours. And it was a lovely-looking cake. And you know how those cakes are on the little plastic, they're on a little cardboard thing, and then they're on a little plastic thing. And so they handed me the cake, and they're like, let's take pictures. I'm like, okay. And there was 20 people in the talk studio when that happened. And as I was holding the cake and I was trying to hold it right for pictures, the damn cake slid right off of the plastic tray and right onto one of our consoles here in the studio.
Which we're not supposed to have food in any of the studios, and we smushed a cake.
I smushed a cake right into the console here at the radio station. It has all these buttons and knobs, and I'm like, oh my. And of course, everybody was live streaming and video recording and taking pictures, and they thought it was funny and cute, and they posted the pictures. And then the engineers saw the video of me dropping a cake.
A sticky icing.
A big sticky cake in the studio. And so I cleaned it up to the best as I could. And honestly, I never heard a word about it since. Evidently, words were had about it. I just wasn't looped in since I was the recipient of the cake, not the perpetrator of the cake. So I was exonerated from being in trouble. Even though I dropped the cake, I was not the one who brought the cake into the studio. Well, flash forward to today. And one of our sister stations, Star 94.5, just rebuilt our engineers. And we have amazing engineers. Honestly, they are some of the best I've ever worked with in my career. And our engineers have completely rebuilt the Star 94.5 studio, and it's gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And their brand manager, Elroy Smith, who I just love that guy, Elroy Smith sends out an email to the entire staff. And it says, good morning, team. Since we're all one big collective family, we wanted to share some great news with you. This morning was the unveiling of the new control room for Star 94.5. See the pictures below. Special thanks to the engineering team who did an exceptional job. Stop by anytime to see the gorgeous studio whenever you want to. By the way, we even have a birthday cake. Stop by and have a slice outside the new studio. Well, it says outside the new studio, but somebody brought the cake into the Star 94.5 studio. Oh. And when I left last night at, 7:30 or so? The engineers were here last night, and they were spending the night here last night because they knew that studio was going to go live at 5 a.m., and they were going to spend the night here so that they would be here at 5 a.m. And so the engineers were here all morning long. They'd been here since 7 o'clock the night before, and they went home. And then they got that email saying that there's cake. And then somebody replied to the chain, one of these reply alls. Somebody replied all with, oh, yeah, we moved the cakes in the studio and come by and get some cake in the studio. And the engineers who had spent their entire night here the night before and had worked so hard to they got in their vehicles and drove back to the radio station. Because there was a cake in the studio. So I just got a text message. This is how I'm finding out now as this all unfolded. So I just got a text message from, I don't want to name her name, but it's Melissa Q. And she texted me and she says, oh my God, I'm so sorry about my cake email this morning. I had no clue that your cake, Joe, your cake incident was real. I honestly thought you edited your Instagram video somehow and that it was a joke that you didn't really spill a cake into the console.
Oh, no.
So she didn't realize that was a real thing.
And it was going to cause mass panic.
Oh, yeah. Well, the engineers came back in just to tell them to get the cake out of the studio. Now, I don't believe anybody spilled the cake in their studio, and that's good. Nobody had to go through the torment that I had to go through. This isn't, by the way, this is not the first time I have been in trouble for bringing food into the studios. You may recall several Christmases ago, I decided to come up to the studio to make, I don't know, this is not Christmas relevant, but I decided to come up on Christmas morning and I made grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup for everybody that was working that day. I was not. I was off Christmas Day because, I'm off on Christmas Day. And I made the most amazing grilled cheese sandwiches, sourdough bread, multiple types of cheese, some Italian spices. I mean, it was truly amazing. I got in so much trouble. I may be the only person in history that has been written up for making sandwiches for my staff.
But because you didn't do it.
Because the real thing, the real mistake I made, if I would have made the grilled cheese sandwiches in the kitchenette,
right,
then I would have been okay. But I didn't make them in the kitchenette. I made them in a studio. And while I am aware that our studios have an automatic fire suppression system, it didn't cross my mind that making grilled cheese sandwiches in a room with an automatic fire suppression system was a bad idea.
It's not even sprinklers, it's a halon.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's not water. It's a gas that will kill you if you don't get out of the building straight away. So twice in my life now here at the same station, I have been in big trouble for food incidents, one of which was totally my fault. The other was not my fault at all. Either way, the moral of the story is don't ever bring cake into the studios. 6:46 here at WDBO.
The Joe Kelly Show on WDBO. Now, WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580. Triple Team Traffic.
Joe. Oh. Well, we are not seeing a sticky situation on the roads, but lots of wet roads to contend with instead. Lots of rain causing delays, reducing visibility. You're going to find on the beach line, both directions between I-4 and the Turnpike. It's going to be heavy there, and also from John Young Parkway to Tradeport Drive. And then on the Greenway, both directions between I-4 and the Turnpike and John Young and Boggy Creek, that rain is causing all sorts of backups. 2 crashes on I-4 to deal with heading eastbound. One is going to be approaching 1792. That's blocking the left lane. The other one is approaching Saxon. And on the Turnpike, some good news. They did clear up that crash just past 192. That was blocking the right lane. It was a tow truck with the crane removing the truck that was struck the guardrail there. So now you've still got those 5 miles worth of backups, but at least that crash has been cleared. This traffic report sponsored by Fresh from Florida. Hey shoppers, this is your local farmer letting you know that Florida watermelon is in season right now. Learn more at followfreshfromflorida.com from the Florida Department of Agriculture. From the WDBO Triple Team Traffic Center, I'm Beverly Bentley Steele.
The Joe Kelly Show on WDBO. Orange, Seminole, Osceola, and all of Central Florida. Join the conversation now by using the open mic in the WDBO app. Now, the Joe Kelly Show on Orlando's News and Talk.
I am so sorry. I lost it. I heard that commercial that just played, and I swear I heard something different. And I was like, did she just say fornicators? Did she say fornicators? Why would she say fornicators? And then I realized she was saying Florida Gators. And then I never realized how much Florida Gators sounds like fornicators. Whoo! Someone needs to go take a nap, Laurel. And
Somebody.
I am pointing at you about
yes.
You got to get some rest. You got to go take a nap. Or
losing it here.
Do something. We got the third hour of the Sean Hannity Show coming up in just a couple of minutes, so stick around for that. A couple of other open mics.
Best of Joe Kelly right there. God bless Joe Kelly.
Thank you.
I'd never do that. I'm too scared of sharks after seeing Jaws when I was a kid.
Yeah, so in all the times I've been scuba diving, and I don't dive anymore. I could, but I'd really need to take a refresher class because I dove mostly back in the mid 1980s, early 1990s, pretty much 1980s. I would love to get back, especially here in Florida. Oh my gosh, man! I dove in Texas where the lakes were murky and the ocean was murky. I don't know if you know this, but the Mississippi River brings millions and millions and millions of pounds of soot out into the Gulf of Mexico, and there's a current in the Gulf of Mexico that causes all of that soot as it blows out the Mississippi River near New Orleans. That soot all drifts to the west. That's the direction of the current. So if you get to a beach just to the east side of the Mississippi River, that's where you get these beautiful beaches like in Alabama and Pensacola and the Florida Panhandle. Those are gorgeous beaches. But if you go just to the right or to the west of the Mississippi River, and you get to those beaches along parts of Louisiana, all of Texas, until you get down all the way to like South Padre Island. I mean, it's just, those are terrible soot and oil covered beaches. Every one of them, every day. They're disgusting. Sean Hannity's third hour is coming up next. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you back here tomorrow night.